So I like it when spring and summer come around in my neighborhood because everyone starts to spend more time outdoors. And it gives neighbors a chance to talk and catch up who maybe you don't really see as much during the winter months. And we gather at the pool, we gather on people's decks and in driveways to visit and catch up about what's been going on in their lives. And often after people learn that I work here, their stories quickly change to share about who in their family is struggling with addiction or who in their lives is in recovery, and then all of their own experiences of fear and the hopes that come with this disease of addiction. And one of these people includes a young man who comes from a family where addiction runs deep. And for me, he is a testament to what it means to have resiliency and remain hopeful. He is the child of an continually active alcoholic and addict, and lived for many years in that home where there was a lot of abuse and neglect until the other side of his family was able to get custody of him. And through everything that he has been through, I have continued to see and hear him remain hopeful about his life. He doesn't have control over the situations that life has presented him, but he seems to understand that he does get to decide how he wants to respond to those things in this world. So as Paul writes the words we heard in Romans, he wants to make sure that our faith in God affects the perspective in which we view our own circumstances. No matter how difficult or even desperate our situation seems, we can face it with hope. And this young man that I adore faces his life with hope. You don't have to look very far to notice that we live in a world that struggles against hopelessness. When talking to people, it is easy to get in a conversation with someone who shares how discouraged they are. And you certainly, if you spend much time listening to the news or reading a paper or listening to the radio, we hear a lot of discouraging news. On a world scale, I think sometimes it can feel like we go from one crisis to another. And sometimes in our own personal lives, it feels like we go from one crisis to the next. And in spite of our best efforts, we know that there will be more conflicts in our world. And I just cringe at the thought of all the political campaigns beginning again and all the negative messages that will bombard our eyes and our ears and all those struggles that we will continue to be faced with. And in our personal lives, there is also pain. We have physical problems that can afflict our bodies, and we endure emotional turmoil that just comes from having relationships with others. If that means the loss of a loved one, or that comes from hurts in our relationships. And we endure emotional pain that comes when addiction takes over our lives or the lives of those we love. And for many of us, if we just spend a moment of honesty with ourselves, we can admit that we have our spiritual struggles too. They may be the struggles of trying to reconnect with God after addiction has felt like it's snuffed out that connection. It may also be a struggle with being disappointed or angry with God for what has happened in our lives, trying to make spiritual sense of why things have happened that feel so painful. We live in a world that is less than perfect, and we live in relationships that are less than perfect. And Paul, as he talks about life, does not sugarcoat the pain and the struggles that we go through in our lives. But I think what he wants to do is to help us put this in perspective to our relationship with God. How might we move through those difficulties and those struggles that are present in our lives if we have an understanding of God as a God who lives in relationship with us? That the holy mystery of God is to understand God existing as divine community. Shirley Guthrie wrote that God is the divine community who lives with and for and in each other, in mutual openness, freedom, and self-giving love. If God at God's very core is about mutually interdependent relationships, then what does that say if we understand ourselves to be created in God's image? For me, that carries great meaning. It says that we don't just exist beside each other, and we aren't just supposed to love each other, but we deeply need each other to be fully human and in order to know God more deeply and fully. We cannot simply exist on our own, in isolation, in autonomy, or separate from being in relationship with God and God's creation. In order to really live out our identity as children of God, and in those ways of understanding God's will for our own lives, we are called and we are created to be in honest and deep relationships with each other as brothers and sisters. We really must share one another's burdens and rejoice when one of us rejoices and weep when one of us weeps. And in that, I always think of one of the first times Danny and I started to become friends, and he shared with me that this is how we're going to do our friendship. We're going to love each other through the hard times, and we're going to love each other through the celebrations, and we're going to show up. And that has been the case for 6 years. So he shows me that each and every time. But the claim also goes even further than the mutual sharing of life's ups and downs. Our claim of God as divine community has implications for all of us that are in any type of relationship or community. Because we know that wherever we are, there's the potential for conflict and for some chaos to show up. And we get to learn how to live into the 12th tradition to place the principles before personalities. It means that we don't just pack up our toys and go home because something happens in our community of faith or our community of recovery. 12-step fellowships opens the doors and offers fellowship to anyone who has the desire to stop using. And our responsibility lies in creating an atmosphere of acceptance, which in turn then helps us to feel the acceptance of God's love. When we practice the principles in all aspects, and we will always have plenty of chances to practice them, those principles include showing love and tolerance even when someone irritates you or you run into that personality that just drives you crazy. And most of us have one or two of those kind of personalities that just rub us wrong every time we are around them. So it's kind of like that code for living. It's about a life in recovery, but it's also about keeping ourselves in a good spiritual condition so that we don't return to unhealthy ways of living or relapse. I enjoy reading blogs, and recovery blogs are one of those that I really enjoy reading. And one that I read this week shared that part of my work is to improve my humanity to man and increase my appreciation of self. That's a heady way of saying, I try not to scream or swear at you when you cut me off in traffic or when you question my ability to do my job. It's taken a long time in sobriety to realize that my reactions to you depend on how well I'm practicing my own code of living. When the code is clicking, every other aspect of my life is good, including my outlook of the personalities that populate my own mind. So if we are honest with ourselves, can you think of those times, those people, places, or circumstances where you just dread stepping into it because you feel like just the life is going to get sucked out of you, and you walk into it anticipating and waiting for it to happen? And as hard as it sometimes can be to change our perspective, it's really not about them. Because remember, our others' personalities cannot kill our principles. And it's easy for us to spend too much time anticipating and dreading those situations, those people, and those circumstances, especially when we deem them to be so different than us. Only we can change our reaction to personalities. A suggestion in the big book is to focus prayerfully on them for at least 2 weeks and pray for all those things that you desire for yourself. Pray them for them. And in that, allowing yourself to be the one who is changed. If God is divine community at God's very core, then somehow you and I have got to figure out how to stick in there with each other so as not to lose out on who we have been created to be together. And I know that I don't always like that challenge from God, and I'm guessing some of you don't either. But I do believe that it is true. Somehow, in God's great imagination and humor, it is only when we are together that we can see the holy mystery with the clearest eyes. When we are together, that is when we catch glimpses of what it means to be in relationship with God. When we are together, that is when we are living out our identity as creatures beautifully and lovingly created in the very image of the holy mystery. Our personal faith journeys and our communal journey of this fellowship frees us to imagine together what it means to be created in this relational image. It frees us from the need to explain, to analyze, or define. It frees us to be poetic about God, to experience God through various forms of prayer and meditation, through dance or art or music or any of those ways that we can express ourselves. And it frees us to rejoice in the beauty of the mystery, to complain about the messiness of it all, and to face the challenges that come with our life and faith in a God who is divine community. That divine community at the very core of who God is, and who has made us in that image together. Amen.